Long before pyramids pierced the desert sky or ships carved the Mediterranean, another story was already being etched into the bones of a vast sun-scorched continent. Australia, ancient, unforgiving, and remote, was the cradle of a human saga 60,000 years deep. No written records, no monuments of stone, just silence, red earth, and the relentless will to survive. The first people who dared to cross the sea into this wild land faced more than just hunger and thirst. They faced the raw fury of nature and a continent unlike any other on Earth. What did it take to survive in this forgotten world? Let's find out. The sea was not kind. It never was. But they crossed it anyway. On the rim of the ancient world, bands of hunter-gatherers stared across the waves toward a smudge of land barely visible on the horizon. They came not with boats of grandeur, but with crude rafts, lashed with vines, hopes, and desperation. Southeast Asia behind them, unknown Earth ahead. This was no migration. This was a plunge into the abyss. Australia was not waiting to welcome them. 60,000 years ago, it was a land of monstrous beasts and climates that turned violent without warning. Towering flightless birds, Genyornis, stalked open plain. Marsupial lions crept through brush with bone-cutting teeth. Megafauna roamed with thunderous steps. And humans were prey. But they made it ashore, barefoot, half-starved, clinging to flint blades and the memory of fire. These first arrivals spread slowly along rivers and coastlines. They learned the scent of danger, the taste of safe routes, and the rhythm of stars. And where their feet pressed into soft, sacred earth, they left more than prints. They left the beginning of a story no one would write down for 60,000 years. They learned early that fire was more than warmth, it was power. The land was dry, grasses grew tall, brittle, and unforgiving. But fire? Fire could turn chaos into strategy. With flint and spark, they set entire fields ablaze, not in rage, but in cunning, to clear brush, to drive out game, to summon new green growth in weeks where the sun gave no mercy. This was firestick farming, and it reshaped the continent. In time, entire ecosystems bent around the flame. Kangaroos began to roam closer to blackened soil, knowing new shoots would follow. Predators circled edges of charred terrain, drawn by the scent of panic and exposed flesh. And the people, they watched, waited, struck with spears carved from mulga and tips dipped in dreams and death. But fire wasn't just a tool. It was a song. It danced in stories told under the night sky, in dances that mimicked its crackle. There were laws that governed who could light the fire and when. One wrong blaze could starve a clan or burn a totem path sacred for generations. The land gave, but only if you knew how to ask. And they were still learning. Beneath every tree, behind every stone, something watched. The dreaming wasn't just a myth, it was law. It was history. It was the voice in the wind and the shadow in the smoke. The people walked through a world humming with spirits, some kind, some vengeful, all ancient. Above them writhed the rainbow serpent, carving rivers with its body and storms with its breath. Below, the bones of ancestors whispered through dust and bone. To survive meant more than hunting well. It meant obeying the unseen. Shamans, bone sorcerers held the thin thread between the living and the other side. With ochre-painted faces and chants that curled the skin, they healed the sick or sent death with a glance. They carved spells into sticks, sang creation into wounds, and stared into fire until the world split open. Children feared them, warriors respected them, the land tolerated them. And through this eerie balance, tribes moved carefully, never sleeping on cursed ground, never killing the wrong lizard, never mocking the thunder. Because in this Stone Age world, death came in many forms, and not all of them walked on two legs. Water was life, but in the heart of Australia, water was war. Beyond the coastal juggles and wet forests, the land turned skeletal. Red dunes stretched endlessly. Salt crusts glistened like mirages. Rivers, when they existed, twisted like dying snakes. Yet people lived here. Thousands of them, raised under blazing suns and dry winds, molded by drought and dream. Children were taught from birth to listen for signs, a shifting bird call, a breeze that smelled of mud, a spider trail etched into dry creek beds. A wrong step meant days without water. A wrong story could mean banishment from the tribe's sacred soak. They drank from roots, sucked moisture from frog wells, and dug deep for ancestral springs hidden beneath cracked soil. Every sip was sacred, every source was remembered in song lines, oral maps woven into melody and memory, passed through generations without a single written word. One forgotten note could erase an entire water path. But scarcity breeds more than ingenuity, it breeds competition. When a dry season dragged on too long, clans clashed at sacred springs. Spears flew under moonlight, dust turned dark, elders wept over broken bodies. And yet, the next day, life moved on. Because the land didn't mourn, it demanded strength. Here, survival wasn't just about strength or skill, it was about remembering, obeying, and respecting a world that gave nothing for free. There were years when the sky refused to weep. The emus vanished, the wallabies scattered, even the termites grew quiet, and the people knew it was time to dig. Hunger stones, buried for generations, were unearthed with trembling hands. They weren't food, they were warnings. Carved with symbols of famine and fire, these ancient markers told of times when even the elders forgot how to sing the rain home. In those years, nothing went to waste. Larvae wriggled in bark and were eaten raw. Lizards were speared with lightning precision, their bones crushed and mixed into broth. Insects became delicacies. Roots were boiled thrice to remove poison. Hunger sharpened every sense, every instinct, every ritual. And then came the death songs. When one could no longer walk, when the eyes grew dim from thirst, a person would sometimes choose the final ritual. They would call the tribe, offer their last words, and sing, softly, hoarsely, a melody older than the dunes, a farewell that would echo through generations. Their body became part of the land, returned to the soil that had raised them and broken them in equal measure. Their name, whispered by the wind, etched into no stone, because memory was survival, and forgetting was death. They once walked among giants. The first Australians knew the thundering shadows of creatures lost to time. Diprotodons, rhino-sized wombats with eyes like moons, roamed the wetlands. The mighty megalania, a lizard longer than 2 men, dragged death behind it like a whisper. There were kangaroos taller than any man and turtles as wide as canoes. But they are gone now. No one knows exactly when the last of these titans fell, but their bones remain, buried beneath sand dunes, cracked in rock shelters, painted on cave walls. Some say it was fire that doomed them. Land burned too often, too fiercely. Others whisper that the hunters grew too skilled, their spears too sharp, and their traps too cruel. Maybe the sky turned colder, maybe the rains shifted, or maybe the balance tipped and the world reshaped itself to favor the small, the swift, and the clever. The people noticed. Stories changed, myths grew darker, the beasts became spirits, warnings rather than memories. Children were told not to hunt certain animals for they bore the blood of giants. And the land too began to shift. Forests shrank. Wetlands dried. The age of monsters ended, and the age of humans truly began. But deep in the caves and under layers of ochre, the shadows of those vanished giants still stretch long and silent. They spoke in colors long before they spoke in words. In the deep stone bellies of the earth, the people left messages, not with letters, but with ochre, charcoal, and blood. Handprints smeared on cave walls, kangaroos mid-leap, spears frozen in flight, serpents with eyes like suns. These were not idle decorations. They were memory, law, warning, and sometimes prophecy. Cave art in places like Arnhem Land and the Kimberley isn't just old, it is eternal. Layer upon layer of pigment traces back through time so deep, some images are older than the last ice age. One line drawn by a trembling hand could be 20,000 years old. Another, half erased, could be 40, but these were not murals for admiration. They were sacred texts without ink. Only the initiated could understand them. A spiral might signify a water hole or a burial site or a spirit watching from the cliffs. A single missing dot could alter an entire ritual. These caves were churches and schools and tombs. To paint them meant permission from ancestors long dead. The brushes? Chewed sticks, feathers, fingers dipped in ochre, made from crushed rocks and fat. Sometimes, the artist's own blood. And when someone disappeared into the caves for days to paint, they returned changed, silent, distant, as if the stone itself had whispered something only they could hear. For 60,000 years, the continent remained untouched by foreign sails. No pyramids, no iron, no wheels, just fire, song, stone, and sky. A civilization moving to rhythms no outsider could hear. But then came the sails, tall, ghost-like, and utterly alien, tearing across the horizon. The first Europeans did not understand the silence. They mistook the absence of cities for the absence of culture. They saw the lack of written words and assumed there were no stories. But the stories had always been there, etched into cliffs, sung across deserts, passed from mouth to mouth for 1,000 generations. Contact was not a meeting, it was a rupture. Diseases arrived first, moving faster than bullets. Then came the guns, the fences, and the foreign gods. Sacred sites were plowed, languages silenced, song lines broken. In some places, entire clans vanished in a single season. But not all was lost. Elders whispered in secret. Paintings reappeared on hidden cliffs. Children were taught forbidden names under the stars. And in the heart of the continent, the earth still listened. The silence was never true silence. It was a story, spoken so softly Only those willing to sit in dust and shadow could hear it. For 60,000 years, the first Australians endured a land that tested every breath, and still, they shaped it, sang to it, and survived it. Their legacy lives in the stones, the fire, and the whispers of the wind. If this story moved you, share your thoughts, subscribe for more forgotten histories, and listen closely. The past still speaks. Want to discover more about Stone Age life? From hunting techniques to ancient tools, there's so much more to explore about how our ancestors survived and thrived. Subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories from the Stone Age.